So as everybody knows, there's this whole thing going around about defund the police. This is becoming kind of like the mantra for a lot of people. People are spray painting it on buildings. People are writing it out in paint on the roads. There's a lot of conversation going on about it now. And from a libertarian perspective, I think a lot of libertarians are kind of like, they get a little bit excited about this, a little bit giddy. I think now maybe less so, because I don't know why it wasn't obvious at first, that groups of angry, pissed off leftists that are crying about racism are not going to be the people that are going to usher in any sort of rational reforms in any way that a libertarian would want. I don't know why that's news to a lot of libertarians who are slowly starting to see that, but I called that from the beginning. You're not going to get any sort of rational defunding of the police or a lessening of the police state by a bunch of pissed off leftists who are, burning shit down and screaming about, racial injustice and about how it's a misuse of tax dollars. Because all of the conversation about it now seems to be, well, what we mean by defund the police is not really get rid of the police. It's that they have too much money. We need to take a shitload of that money away, and we need to put it into things like this here. You need to put it into universal health care. You need to put it into all these other things, which they say are the real reasons that crime happens in the first place. And as a libertarian, how the hell can you be surprised that all of their solutions are going to involve more money to the state? More money to the state, whether it's federal or local. It's always going to be that way. See, this defund the police. What we need is, well, okay, let's start with this. We need more money in education. The state has a practical monopoly on education. Okay, just the Department of Education itself gets like $90 billion a year. Plus whatever it gets at the state and local level where most education happens. But it is almost entirely government run. If, let's imagine, a private business had a cornering on any market the way that the federal government has on education, all these same people would be demanding that the government break it up because it's a monopoly. So in all intents and purposes, education is a monopoly in this country, and all the problems with education, whether they should be or not, are at the fault of government. And universal health care, like, the government hasn't already fucked up the current healthcare system quite enough in the United States. We need them to run the thing all together. Like, it's every solution. Every time there is a problem, these people, it's part of their political philosophy. Part of their political philosophy can be no matter how bad the state fails, no matter how many countries it bombs, no matter that it steals a third of your income, even according to their own narrative, that the enforcement wing of the state is murdering people based on race. That's their narrative. And it's causing mass incarceration. It's locking people up for non-violent crimes like drug use and things like that. Parts of that are exactly what I would agree with them on. But that is straight from their own mouth. But yet their solution to everything is to give the government significantly more power, let it take more money, let it run more things. But that's where the reasonable aspect of defund the police comes from. It isn't going to come from the left, because the left is going to want more money for something and probably going to end up getting you something worse than the current police state that we have. The libertarian solution should be more about competition, and, by my opinion, absolutely no tax is going to anything whatsoever. You should be able to keep 100% of what you earn because it's yours. But if we're going to have systems like this, they should be voluntarily funded. I personally think that anything the government ever does should start almost like a GoFundMe. Some kind of a system like that where people can chip in, because you're going to find out if people are willing to pay for something, they have to actually want something to happen. And if people don't want something to happen, they're not going to voluntarily fund it. But not only does that work hand in hand with freedom and voluntarism and free choice, freedom for you to choose, but it also works hand in hand with not having a giant government that's going to be forcing things on everybody. And of course, we can still have rules around that, what people are allowed to do, but this also goes into the issue with police having a monopoly on force. I don't hear any of that criticism coming from Black Lives Matter crowds, or really anybody on the left in the first place, because they only care about monopolies when the private sector has a monopoly on something. They don't give a shit about it whenever the state or the feds have a monopoly on something. But there's a deeper point to all this. I see too many bad comparisons being warped around to fit a narrative. Like, I understand a lot of libertarians are not happy with the police. They're not happy with the state having the monopoly on force. I get a lot of that. I get all of it, basically, that I hear. But what I don't approve of, and I can't get behind, I can't rally behind your banner if you're going to blatantly misrepresent reality in order to fit that narrative. I don't care what camp it is. I don't care if we agree on like 99% of everything. If we don't agree on that, it makes me start not trusting a lot of you. Like, we have to do better than this. Look at this. Come on, guys. Come on. Like, I think we can come together. We can agree, like, what happened to George Floyd was absolutely fucked up. I'm not even 100% convinced that it was racism. Didn't the guys, my understanding of it, didn't the guys have a history? And even that cop had a history of being a piece of shit. Was he racist? He might very well have been. But I don't just assume that because I see a white cop kill a black guy. I don't just assume that. For the same reason when I've done videos on this in the past where 2/3 of black citizens who get killed by cops are killed by black cops. I don't just assume that that cop is an Uncle Tom or that he just secretly hates black people. I don't just assume that. I actually just have to look at any sort of context. And if you have some, and maybe there is some out there that I just haven't seen or I'm not familiar with, it's totally possible. I make mistakes. Some things miss my attention. The cop very well could have been a racist piece of shit. I don't doubt that. There's plenty of racist pieces of shit out there. And there's plenty of racist pieces of shit that have badges. I'm sure because there's enough cops in this country and enough pieces of shit in this country that the two might intertwine in a career of law enforcement. Okay? I'm not doubting that at all. But I also don't just assume that. But when I see shit like this, I'm just like, guys, come on. Come on, like, is there no context that matters here? I mean, really, if your takeaway is that Dylan Roof got that kind of treatment and Rayshard Brooks got that kind of treatment, just because, the only distinction there being that one was white and one was black, dude, that is just straight up insanity. Insanity. If you actually believe that. You have to be willfully ignorant of everything that transpired to really believe that that is why that happened. And to think that that's just how the system works. Dylan Roof, by the way, for those of you who don't know, is the white supremacist piece of shit that murdered those 9 black people when they were worshiping at church. Now, the way that this was spun at the time, because I remember making videos on it, was that the cops got him Burger King because, I guess they were rewarding him for murdering black people? Come on, guys. Like, we can have a narrative about how we need to rein in, like, police brutality and that cops are abusing authority. You can have that narrative. You can even have the narrative that racism exists in America, because it absolutely does. But that even if you want to argue that it exists on a systemic level, that the system is based around prejudice against minorities, if you want to even have that argument, at least play in reality of context. Okay? Dylan Roof wasn't rewarded with Burger King for killing black people. Okay, and the reason Rayshard Brooks is dead is because in that interaction with law enforcement, he resisted arrest, took their taser, shot the taser at them, ran away, and was trying to shoot it again when he got shot. Now, you can argue all day long, that the cops didn't have to kill the guy. You could argue that all day long. And I will listen to that and I'll have that conversation all day long. I'll do that. There's a reasonable response to that. But there's not a reasonable response to say that those two situations were identical. And that the guy only got shot by the cops because he was black. Driving while black and they killed him. Some of the stuff that people are saying, like, the man just went to Wendy's. Is that worth a death sentence? It's like, dude, how can we even have a conversation? How can we pretend to be reasonable if you're going to act like that and be that obtuse in your take? And what's really crazy about the Rayshard Brooks thing is I was only familiar with the burning down of the Wendy's and that there was a black man who was shot in the back by cops. That's what I knew. But I also know enough about how the media frames things in conversation to know, like, for anything that happens, you do have to dig a little bit deeper because they will misrepresent things. And lo and behold, they did it with this. Like, is that what happened? Yeah, it is what happened. Is that grossly misleading? Yes, it is grossly misleading. Again, you can be against what happened and still understand at least some sort of context where it wasn't just a driving while black. This man got shot trying to get a fucking Frosty. You believe that? Just because he was black. Well, it's like, there's a bit more to it. And what was crazy is, like, watching this on the news was they were telling that story like it was just the most unjust thing. What was going on, like this was a guy that basically like a didn't do anything kind of situation. And the entire time they're talking, this was my introduction to the video. They're showing this video right here that we're watching. They're showing this in the background of commentators talking about it. And I'm like, dude, does he have a taser? I'm like watching, okay, like I see them give him a breathalyzer. Then he starts resisting, running, goes down to the ground with these 2 cops, grabs the taser. I see the taser spark. So he shot the taser. The whole time these commentators just acting like we have such a problem with the cops and the way that they're handling this. It's like, dude, got to understand, even from a libertarian point of view, you do live in the confines of this system where the state does have that monopoly on force. And again, we can argue that all day long. But I'm also going to save my outrage for people who didn't resist arrest, fight the cops, get a taser, shoot at the cops, and run away and shoot at the cops again while they got shot in the back. Like, I'm going to save my outrage on that. Like, look, the cop pulls you out of your car and just starts kicking the shit out of you, and you pull out your pistol and you shoot him. I got your back. I understand. Like, I'm with you. But I'm going to save my outrage for the people who are, like, truly victimized. Just like the video of, during the riots, the black lady punched that white cop, like, twice in the face, and a black cop came up and just, like, knocked her out in one punch. And I know a lot of people were pissed off about that, but I'm also, like, for me, I'm watching that and I'm like, dude, I'm going to save my outrage. Because the George Floyd thing was something that was outrageous. You know, there's plenty of these occasions and situations where something is outrageous. But I'm going to save my outrage for the truly outrageous. And right now, my outrage is less about Rayshard Brooks and a bit more about people that are taking part in the greatest political philosophy in the history of at least modern humanity. Just being so obtuse and pretending that the ends justify the means. That as long as we can get people on our side to disband the cops or to lessen taxes or whatever it is in the varying different degrees of libertarianism that you actually want to do, that you're going to be dishonest because the ends will just justify the means. Well, I don't play that game. I don't play that game. We might want the same ends, but I'm not going to fucking lie and distort reality to get to that conclusion.